Ever planted sweet potatoes only to end up with a tangled mess of vines and nothing but tiny, disappointing tubers at harvest time? You are not alone. Sweet potatoes can be a little tricky in containers, but once you understand how they actually grow and what they need, you can pull off some truly impressive harvests right on your patio or deck. In this video, I am going to walk you through the complete process of growing sweet potatoes in containers from start to finish. We will cover everything from getting your slips to harvesting big, beautiful tubers. Plus, stick around to the end where I will show you how to cure your sweet potatoes so they become even sweeter and store for months. Let us get into it. Sweet potatoes are one of the most rewarding crops you can grow at home. They are packed with nutrition, they taste incredible, and honestly, there is something really satisfying about dumping out a container and finding all those tubers hiding in the soil. The good news is that growing them in containers is absolutely doable, even if you have limited space. Once you understand the basics and follow the right steps, you will be harvesting more sweet potatoes than you know what to do with. Now, before we start planting, we need to understand something important about how sweet potatoes grow, because they are a little different from regular potatoes. With regular potatoes, you plant a piece of the potato itself, a chunk with an eye on it, and it sprouts and grows. Sweet potatoes do not work that way. Instead, we grow sweet potatoes from what are called slips. A slip is basically a sprout that grows off of a sweet potato tuber. You take that sprout, root it, and plant it. That slip then grows into a vine, and as the vine grows, it produces roots underground, and those roots swell up into the tubers we harvest. So we are not planting a piece of sweet potato in the soil. We are planting a rooted sprout. This is really important to understand because it affects everything from sourcing your planting material to how you care for the plant. The vines spread out above ground, sometimes quite aggressively, while the tubers are forming below. And here is something else to keep in mind. Sweet potatoes are a warm weather crop. They came from Central and South America originally, tropical and subtropical climates. That means they love heat, they love sunshine, and they need a long growing season, usually around 90 to 120 days depending on the variety. So how do you actually get your hands on slips? You have a couple of options here. The easiest way is to buy them. You can find sweet potato slips at garden centers in the spring, usually around the same time you would be buying tomato transplants. You can also order them online from seed companies, and that actually gives you access to a much wider variety selection. You will find varieties like Beauregard, which is probably the most popular, Covington, Georgia Jet, and even some purple and white fleshed varieties if you want to get a little adventurous. When you are buying slips, look for ones that are healthy and green, not wilted or yellowing. They should have some root development, or at least be ready to root quickly once you get them in water or soil. Now, if you want to grow your own slips, and honestly, this is pretty fun to do, here is how it works. About 8 to 12 weeks before your last frost date, take a healthy sweet potato and suspend it part way in a jar of water. You can stick toothpicks in the sides to hold it up, with about the bottom third submerged. Place it in a warm spot with decent light, and within a few weeks, you will see sprouts starting to emerge from the top. Those sprouts are your slips. Once they are about 6 inches tall and have some leaves, you can gently twist them off the potato and place them in their own jar of water to develop roots. In about a week or two, they will have a nice root system and be ready to plant. 1. Sweet potato can produce quite a few slips, so this is a great way to get a lot of planting material for free. Just make sure you are starting with an organic sweet potato if you go this route, because conventionally grown ones are often treated with a sprout inhibitor that will make this whole process a lot harder. All right, let us talk about containers. This is where a lot of people go wrong with sweet potatoes. You need to think big. Sweet potatoes produce their tubers underground, and they need room to do it. I recommend a container that holds at least 15 to 20 gallons of soil. A 20-gallon grow bag works great, or you can use a large plastic tub, a half whiskey barrel, or even a big 5-gallon bucket if that is all you have, though you will get a smaller harvest. The key is depth and width. You want at least 12 inches of depth, but honestly, 18 inches or more is better. The more soil volume you have, the more room those tubers have to size up. Drainage is also critical. Sweet potatoes do not like sitting in waterlogged soil. It will cause your tubers to rot. So make sure whatever container you choose has plenty of drainage holes in the bottom. If you are using a plastic tub that does not have holes, drill some yourself. I usually do 5 or 6 half-inch holes in the bottom, and that does the trick. Now let us get into soil and planting. Sweet potatoes want a loose, well-draining soil that is moderately fertile. You do not want anything too heavy or compacted because the tubers need to be able to expand easily. A good quality potting mix works well as a base. I like to mix in some compost for fertility and a little perlite if the mix seems too dense. You do not need to go crazy with nitrogen though. Too much nitrogen will give you tons of lush vine growth but smaller tubers. Think of it this way. The plant puts its energy into whatever you encourage. Lots of nitrogen encourages leaves and vines. We want the energy going into those roots. A balanced fertilizer, or one that is slightly lower in nitrogen and higher in phosphorus and potassium, is ideal. When you are ready to plant, fill your container with your soil mix, leaving about 2 inches of space from the rim. Take your slip and bury it so that about half to 2/3 of the stem is underground, with the leaves above the soil line. The buried stem will produce roots along its length, and those roots are what will eventually swell into tubers. Space your slips about 12 inches apart if you are planting multiple slips in a large container. For a 20-gallon container, I usually plant 2 to 3 slips. For a 15-gallon, 1 to 2 is plenty. You do not want to crowd them too much, or you will end up with a lot of small tubers instead of nice big ones. After planting, give them a good watering to settle the soil around the roots. The slips might look a little sad for the first few days, maybe a bit wilted. That is totally normal. They are adjusting. Within a week or so, they will perk up and start putting out new growth. Where you place your containers makes a huge difference with sweet potatoes. Remember, these are tropical plants. They want heat and they want sun. Full sun is essential, at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight per day. More is better. If you are in zones 8 through 11, you can grow sweet potatoes outdoors for most of the season without much trouble. If you are in cooler zones, say zone 7 or below, you will want to wait until the soil has really warmed up before planting. Usually a couple weeks after your last frost, when daytime temperatures are consistently in the 70s and nighttime temperatures stay above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Sweet potatoes will not grow in cold soil. They just sit there and sulk, and sometimes rot. One advantage of containers is you can place them in the warmest microclimate you have. A spot against a south-facing wall, on a concrete patio that absorbs heat, or anywhere that stays warm and sunny is perfect. By the way, if you are finding this helpful so far, take a second to subscribe so you do not miss more videos like this one. All right, let us keep going. Watering sweet potatoes in containers requires a bit of attention, more so than if they were in the ground. Containers dry out faster, especially in hot weather, and sweet potatoes do need consistent moisture. The key word here is consistent. You do not want the soil to go bone dry, but you also do not want it soggy. Waterlogged soil leads to rot, and drought stress can cause cracked or misshapen tubers. What I do is check the soil every day or two by sticking my finger about 2 inches down. If it feels dry at that depth, it is time to water. In the heat of summer, that might mean watering every day, or even twice a day, for containers in full sun. Early morning is the best time to water, so the plants have moisture available during the hottest part of the day. One trick I have learned is to mulch the top of your containers with a couple inches of straw or shredded leaves. This helps hold moisture in the soil and keeps the roots a little cooler, which sweet potatoes actually appreciate even though they love heat up top. As for fertilizing, I give my sweet potatoes a dose of balanced fertilizer about 3 to 4 weeks after planting, and then again about halfway through the season. I prefer a granular organic fertilizer that I can scratch into the top inch of soil and water in. You do not need to feed them heavily. In fact, over-fertilizing is one of the more common mistakes I see. If your vines are going absolutely crazy, but your harvest is disappointing, you probably gave them too much nitrogen. Keep it moderate and focus on phosphorus and potassium to support tuber development. Let us talk about those vines for a minute, because sweet potato vines can get a little out of control. In the ground, they will spread out and cover a huge area. In containers, you have a couple of options for managing them. You can let them spill over the sides and trail down, which actually looks quite attractive on a patio or deck. The foliage is pretty, especially some of the ornamental varieties with purple or chartreuse leaves. Or, if space is tight, you can gently coil the vines back on top of the container or train them up a small trellis. Some people worry about pruning the vines, and here is my take on that. Light pruning is fine and will not hurt your harvest. If the vines are getting way too aggressive and taking over everything, you can trim them back. Just do not go crazy and remove more than about a third of the foliage at once, because the plant needs those leaves for photosynthesis to fuel tuber growth. I have also heard of people eating the leaves and young vine tips, which are actually nutritious and popular in some cuisines. So if you do trim, you can toss those trimmings in a stir-fry. Now let us talk about some common problems you might run into and how to solve them. Honestly, sweet potatoes are pretty tough plants, but there are a few things to watch out for. First, if your leaves are turning yellow, especially the older leaves at the base of the plant, that is often a sign of overwatering or poor drainage. Check that your container is draining properly and ease up on the watering a bit. It can also indicate a nitrogen deficiency, so if the drainage is fine and the soil has been drying out between waterings, a light feeding might help. Second, if you are seeing holes in the leaves, you probably have some pest activity. Flea beetles, Japanese beetles, and caterpillars can all munch on sweet potato foliage. The good news is that sweet potatoes can handle quite a bit of leaf damage without it affecting your harvest too much. If the damage is minor, I usually just leave it alone. If it is getting heavy, you can pick off the pests by hand or use an organic insecticidal soap. I have found that healthy, well-watered plants tend to outgrow pest damage pretty quickly. Third, if your vines are growing like crazy, but you end up with very few tubers or tiny ones at harvest, there are a few possible causes. Too much nitrogen is the most common culprit, like I mentioned earlier. But it can also happen if the plants did not get enough sun, if the growing season was too short, or if the container was too small. Sweet potatoes need that long, warm growing season to really size up their tubers. Fourth, watch out for cracked tubers. This usually happens when watering is inconsistent, like a dry spell followed by a heavy watering. The tubers expand too quickly and crack. Keeping your moisture levels steady throughout the season will prevent this. Fifth, if you notice your tubers have a bitter taste or a stringy texture after harvest, they were probably stressed at some point during growth, either from drought, cold temperatures, or being left in the ground too long after the vines died back. Harvesting at the right time makes a big difference in quality. The good news is that if you follow the steps we have covered, giving them enough space, the right soil, consistent water, plenty of sun, and a long warm season, you should avoid most of these issues and end up with a really nice harvest. Speaking of harvest, let us talk about when and how to do it. Sweet potatoes are usually ready to harvest about 90 to 120 days after planting, depending on the variety. You will know they are getting close when the vines start to yellow and die back a bit. But here is the thing. You do not have to wait for that. You can actually start checking your tubers earlier by gently digging around the base of the plant with your hands to see how big they are getting. If you are happy with the size, you can harvest. If they are still small, give them more time. One thing you absolutely must do is harvest before your first frost. Frost will damage the tubers and ruin them for storage. So keep an eye on your weather forecast as fall approaches. If a frost is coming and your tubers are not quite as big as you would like, harvest them anyway. A smaller harvest is better than a ruined one. To harvest from a container, the easiest method is to just dump the whole thing out onto a tarp or into a wheelbarrow. This is actually one of the best things about growing in containers. No digging required. Just tip it over and sort through the soil to find your tubers. Be gentle as you handle them. Fresh sweet potatoes have thin, delicate skin that bruises easily, and damaged tubers will not store as well. Shake off the excess soil, but do not wash them yet. Washing can introduce moisture and promote rot during storage. Now for that bonus tip I promised you at the beginning. If you want your sweet potatoes to taste their absolute best and store for months, you need to cure them. A lot of people skip this step and wonder why their homegrown sweet potatoes are not as sweet as the ones from the store. Here is the secret. Freshly harvested sweet potatoes are actually not that sweet. The curing process converts the starches into sugars and also toughens up the skin for long-term storage. Here is exactly how to do it. After harvest, place your unwashed sweet potatoes in a warm, humid location for about 10 to 14 days. You want temperatures around 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit with high humidity, around 80 to 90% if possible. A bathroom with a space heater works, or you can place them in a plastic bin with a loose-fitting lid in a warm room. Some people use a heating mat designed for seed, starting to keep the temperature up. After curing, move them to a cool, dark place for storage, ideally around 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. A basement, root cellar, or even a closet in a cooler part of your house works well. Do not refrigerate them. Cold temperatures will damage the flesh and give them an off flavor. Properly cured sweet potatoes will store for 4 to 6 months, sometimes even longer. I have had some last well into spring, and the flavor just keeps getting better and sweeter the longer they cure. So that is everything you need to know about growing sweet potatoes in containers and getting a huge harvest. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you do not miss future videos. And if you have any questions or want to share your own sweet potato growing tips, drop them in the comments below. I always love hearing from you. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck in the garden.